Do you want to open or you want me to open?
Like open about our feelings.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I feel pretty good. Very talky.
That's good. Except you're not supposed to talk as much today.
Yeah, well, I will.
Did you get your cards?
What cards?
I thought you were grabbing cards from your office.
Oh yeah, they're in the cameras.
Oh, those cards. Gotcha.
Yeah, we're just gonna play a deck of cards.
Woo! I mean, I'm down.
Welcome to the Young Adults Podcast. It's called Yap Life, and
We live intentionally for elevators.
I'm Ryan.
I'm
This
Japheth.
is Japheth. Yeah,
I can introduce myself. That's okay.
you got it. Okay, go. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, just like that?
Mm-hmm.
Just like that. Well, what do you want to know?
What kind of vibe do you bring to the function?
What kind of vibe do I bring? I don't know. Masculinity?
Are you being for real? You just bring the masculine to
I mean,
the
you
party?
see this beard?
Yeah, that's true. You got the nice cut too.
Yeah. I actually got a compliment on that this week. It was weird.
Yeah?
Somebody was like, your beard lines are super crisp. And I was like, thanks.
I not now obviously, but I have been complimented that before, and it's a nice compliment. I'm like, okay, thank you.
I was like, oh, I do it myself. Thanks.
Yeah.
Actually, I think he asked. He's like, did you do that professionally or did you do it yourself? I was like, I do it myself.
It's kind of hard to do it yourself. I don't know, like to make it even. I'm like this in the mirror, like.
I also can see this side better than this side.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird. I'm like, I can't see.
But anyway, we've started.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What should we? So this is the Yap Life podcast.
Yeah.
And why are we doing this, Japheth? What?
Well, I'll share a little bit about my process of getting to of wanting to do a podcast. It had been on my mind for like quite a while. Like I've been like, I think doing a podcast would be super cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I never took that thought super seriously. I did make a plan of like what I would want to do for it, but I never really took it seriously. And then one night at the Bible study, I was leading a table and two people looked at me and they're like, you should start a podcast. Just out of the blue, super randomly. I was like, dang. Well, I've actually thought about that in the past, so maybe I should, if people want me to do a podcast and I want to do a podcast, why not?
Yeah.
And then thought about it for a couple weeks, talked with a few people about it, and quickly realized I do not have the skill set to do. I can talk, like I like talking, so I can do that.
There you go.
But I have no technical know-how. And then just one day I was driving, I think it was in my truck. I was on my way home from church actually, and I was like, the Lord was like, you should talk to Ryan. I was like, I should talk to Ryan. I think he's got he's got that skill set. That's what he does for work. So then took you out for coffee one day and I was like, yo, Ryan, I got this. I want to do a podcast. And then you were like, dude, I've talked about the same thing. And we both talked to different people at the church about it.
Yeah.
So that was super cool.
Yeah, because I've always thought like podcasting would be awesome, just to literally just hit record on some cameras and audio and just literally talk, have a good time, talk about important things. Like I'm a very deep thinker. I'm not a fan of small talk. I just like like you tell me where you're from and I'm just like, oh cool, but it goes right past my head. But tell me like what you think of the cosmos
deep, dark
and
secrets. I will
cherish
them forever.
Expanding universe and how that makes you feel. I will talk about that forever. I don't know, just stuff like that, like deep things. So yeah, when you came to me about the podcast, I was like, yes, I'm in. And I am a visual media producer. So I went to school to do photography, videography, and some design. So yeah, it's always so cool when I hear people say, like, oh, God told me to talk to you, or God told me this about you. I'm like, God's like talking to people about me? Like that feels so cool. And that happened to me the other day too. The other week, some girl that I met, she said that God told her something about me. And then I was like, that's so true. I was like, wow, God just knows me. It's great. I find that stuff so cool. And the fact that you said that, it makes me all warm inside. Thanks, God.
You got that warm, fuzzy feeling.
And then at the same time, like, what else did God tell you? Is he telling you all my secrets? But
You don't want to know what I know.
Yeah, but that's so cool. Yeah, I think it's awesome that we can come here and just talk. And we'll have a bunch of people on here too, like with different stories and backgrounds, and
Yeah.
it should be super exciting. But for this episode, what are we doing?
We thought to start off, the first 2 episodes would be a good time for us to both share our testimony a little bit, just so that whoever's listening on the other side of this recording can know who they're listening to and understand that, like, kind of our journey to get to where we are. So today we're going to hear my testimony a little bit, which that's still sinking in a little bit, that I'm going to have my testimony out there for the world to hear, but it's okay. It's not my story. It's the story of Christ in me. So
Yeah.
that's pretty...
Yeah.
That'll be how it goes. In the next episode, you hear from Ryan about his testimony.
Yeah. The next one will be mine. And when we first talked about doing our testimonies, I was like, yeah, that's such a great idea. Get people to know us a little bit. And I thought about it more. I'm like, that's like my whole life just out there.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy, but...
We're not going through my whole life because that'll take
Yeah.
my whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but we'll hit the highlights.
The important bits.
Maybe more accurately, the lowlights.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So...
You know, just random thought. Like, I don't think your life gets built on the highs. I think your life gets built on the lows.
That's so true. I think that's... Yeah, that's very true. I think you there's this saying that you have to hit rock bottom to be able to, like, actually grow.
Yeah.
And like to build a foundation, and I do think those lows are what get you there.
Yeah, because you ever heard somebody that's like, dude, all these good things happen, and that's why I'm this way. I don't think I've ever had that.
Right.
I've had everybody's like, this is the crap that I've been through.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I am the way I am. That's what's taught me. You learn more from your failings and from the hard things in life than you do from the good times.
Exactly. And that's part of what this podcast is about, talking about those hard times. Like, I'm 23, you're 21.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays, life as early 20-year-olds is not easy for us. I don't know. Prices rising, jobs are getting harder to get, and
anxiety and depression, mental health, things are at an all-time high.
Exactly. And then on top of that, being a Christian in this world where you're doing things differently than how the world thinks you should. So that's why we thought this was such an important thing to do, just for our community and for anyone who wants to listen.
Because sometimes you just need to know that there's somebody else out there that's going through it too.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's nice to have somebody that's already gone through it be like, you know what, I've been there.
Yeah.
This is what I did to get out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
To some extent. Not that either of us has like all wisdom knowledge.
Yeah.
But we can at least share what we've been through in an effort or a hope that you can at least learn something from our stories, from our mistakes, from our rough times.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. Okay. Yeah, do you want to just get going on your... I just should look at the time so we're not going way over. Okay, cool.
I know, I was kind of like I should have started a timer or something. But
yeah, we'll feel it out, I guess.
Yeah. Where do I want to start? At the beginning, I suppose.
Yeah.
Probably the best. Well, let's start right in the middle. I think most people our age, especially, who have that like time in their like in the teen, like when you're in high school. I think that's when most people had that was their big moment of coming back to the Lord. Mine happened a lot earlier in my life. Well, sort of. I still had my struggles in high school, but my big foundation moment for my faith happened when I was quite little. So I'm the oldest of 3 kids, of 3 children. Most people, when they ask me, how many siblings do you have, depending on how I'm feeling, the answer changes.
Right.
So if I'm not in a talkative mood, it'll be I have 1. That's not necessarily true.
Right.
The answer is I have 2, but only one of them is alive today. So when I was about 3 years old, my younger brother was born. And before he was born, for like the good last half of the pregnancy, my parents had picked out the name Ezra. And then 3 days before he was born, they both looked at each other and just went, he's not an Ezra. And they came up with the name Nathaniel. And Nathaniel means gift from God. And I need you to remember that going forward.
Right.
So the day he was born, my mom actually almost, like, pregnancy was really hard on her, and she almost didn't make it. But thankfully the Lord wasn't ready to take her home yet, so she's still here, and I very much cherish her in my life. But So I didn't get to come see them right away because Mom wasn't doing super hot. And then once I finally did come, my grandma took me. And I was absolutely terrified to get off the elevator. I refused to get off the elevator. Grandma had to drag me off. But as soon as I saw that little boy, it was just immediate. It was like, this is my best friend.
Wow.
And we were inseparable growing up for the years he was around. I have memories of when he was, I don't know, 6 months old, however old kids are when they're parent. Do you know what a jolly jumper is?
I think so. It's where you can bounce.
Yeah, you hang him from. It's like a seat that hangs from the roof, and you can bounce in it. And so I would lie underneath his jolly jumper, and he would jump on me, and we'd just both be having a blast.
Yeah. Wait, what was the age difference again? You probably said it.
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
3 years. So I was 3 when he was born. Yeah. I think it was about 3.5 when he was born.
Okay.
So yeah. Excuse me. But so then moving forward, we were super close. My favorite picture of the two of us is there's a picture. We're looking out. We lived on an acreage at the time, and we're looking out the window, and he's got both hands on the glass, and I've got one hand on his head and one hand on the glass, and we're both just looking out. And I was like, that image describes our relationship perfectly.
Yeah.
Just this big brother who's like, this is my little brother. You're like my cherished possession.
Yeah.
And then when my parents first moved him out of their room, when he was old enough to sleep in his own room, we lived, the acreage was designed like a mobile home. So the master bedroom on one side of the house, the other bedroom's on the other side.
Right.
So we each had a room on the other side of the house, and when they first moved out, neither of us would sleep. My parents could not get us to sleep, and one day they were like, you know what, screw it, let's put him in the same room. And that night we both slept through the night.
Yeah.
So we needed that,
wow.
I needed to be near my brother, he needed to be near me, and then we could sleep. When he was about a year and a half, a little before a year and a half, my parents started to notice there was just something wrong. He wasn't sleeping. The only way we could get him to sleep was if my dad sat in an armchair and held him upright. It was the only way we could get him to sleep. So my parents knew something was wrong, and he just wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
So we ended up going to the doctor, and then they ended up going further to more. I don't remember the whole story, but he ended up getting tested for cancer. And he came back positive for ATRT, which is an atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumor, which is a fairly aggressive and rare form of cancer most commonly found in kids under 3. And the complications of kids under 3 having cancer is you can't use chemo.
Right.
Because it's too damaging on their brains. They're not developed enough to withstand it.
Yeah.
And yes, chemo is very dangerous, but it does drastically help in a lot of cases with cancer.
Yeah.
So that was already a bad start, knowing that he couldn't have chemo, and it was a brain tumor. So it was in the back of his head, which is why he wasn't sleeping. There was so much pressure. Wow. When he would lie down, he had to sit up to get that pressure gone, and then he could sleep, which is why my dad had to hold him. So he spent about a month in in Red Deer, in the hospital here. And my mom lived in the hospital with him. She never left. And I spent most of the time he was in the hospital living, I kind of bounced between places, but for the most part, I lived with my uncle and aunt who had 2 kids, one of them a month younger than me, and one of them's 2 years older than me. So the 3 of us shared a room in their house, and I lived with them for the most part. Mm-hmm. And then after a month in Red Deer, he moved to Edmonton, and he was there for 3 months. So Edmonton's about an hour drive to get to the hospital. So I lived with my uncle and aunt, sometimes my grandparents. Every once in a while, Dad would take me home, and I'd be home with him. And then every so often, I'd be in Edmonton at an uncle's place. But for the most part, I lived with my uncle and aunt on their acreage. And I would go visit him about once a week. And he had some complications along the way with his surgeries and stuff. So they went to do a major surgery one day. But the thing is, the anesthetic that they use doesn't always work on children. So they gave him enough tranquilizer to knock out a moose.
Oh my goodness.
And he was just still kicking and laughing and having a blast. And they were like,
for real?
You need to be unconscious right now.
How old is this kid?
He was a year and a half at the time.
Wow.
A little over a year and a half. And he just was having the time of his life high on this tranquilizer, basically. Which is supposed to knock you out. Full-grown moose would have been knocked out with that dose.
That's insane.
And he was just having a blast. So they couldn't do the surgery that day, unfortunately. So they had to reschedule. They did the surgery, finally another week. And the weeks when he was in surgery, my parents didn't let me come up and visit because they didn't want me to see him
Right.
in recovery, basically. And throughout some of the drugs he was taking, he still lost all his hair, and especially after the surgery, they shaved it off. So they ended up removing about 90% or 99% of the tumor.
Right.
But if they would have removed the rest, they would have killed him, because they would have started
Right.
taking stuff from his brain, basically, and that would have killed him. So they couldn't get the whole tumor out, which was not a good thing, because you need to remove it completely.
Yeah, because they'll keep growing.
Yeah. So then a few weeks later, they went to do an MRI, but somebody left a clothespin on the top of his shirt, so they couldn't see in the MRI because the pin messed up the. So they rescheduled it. Got another MRI, and they found 2 more tumors, 2 more golf ball sized tumors along his spine. After they'd removed a golf ball sized tumor from his brain.
Yeah.
So at that point, that was probably 2.5 months into his cancer journey. And at that point, roughly around then, the doctors came to my parents and said, it's no longer a matter of if he's going to die, it's a matter of when he's going to die. We can't do anything for him at this point.
Yeah.
So at the time, I'd been visiting all the time, once a week, as much as my 4-year-old self could control that. And then while he was in the hospital, I turned 5. So then still, I'm not in control really of when I get to go see him. I just got to go see him as much as other people could allow. So when he was, for the first 3 months of his cancer journey, he was awake. And I would go and I'd play games with him. We each had a stuffy that we got, Cutie Pie, and I can't remember what the other one was. It was a little leopard and a little dog.
Yeah.
I'd play with him. I'd hang out with him. Just be his brother.
Yeah.
Then the last month of his life, he ended up in a coma. And he couldn't, at that point, you can't play with him. He's sleeping, basically.
Yeah.
But he was, still conscious and, aware of his surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, I don't know how to explain it other than, it was like when you're half asleep and you know what's going on. You can hear things, but you're not, involved in it.
You can't actually move or anything.
So at that point, when I would go to visit, I was like, well, I want to do something with him. So I would say, can I hold him? And I would hold him. And at this point in his life, none of his stats were ever that good. They were mid-50s.
Mm-hmm.
I would hold him and I would just do the only thing I could, and I would sing to him. And I would sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, all the lullabies. And when I was singing to him, all of his stats would go from the low 40 or high 40s, low 50s, and they'd get to mid 90s.
Wow.
So they would just skyrocket. And then, that just to me was how close we were.
Right.
When his brother held him and he heard him singing, it just made him feel so much better. And I kind of like to think he just wasn't in pain at those times either. He was just, I am held by the person I cherish the most, and I'm comfortable and happy right now.
Yeah. And
so then, about 4 months in, I ended up going on a trip to BC. My grandparents owned a condo in Fairmont Hot Springs. So I went there for a week. So I didn't see him for a whole week at a time. And then I came back. And then it was my uncle's birthday, actually. And my grandma took me up because my grandpa had an appointment in Edmonton somewhere. Mm-hmm. So Grandpa dropped Grandma and I off at the hospital. We called my parents, said, hey, we're here. He was up on the 3rd floor in the children's stollery. So my dad was holding him at the time, and Mom came downstairs to come get Grandma and I. And for whatever reason, it took us half an hour to get from the basement of the hospital to the 3rd floor to his room. And my dad says, when Mom left, he whispered to Nathaniel, your brother's here. He's coming to see you. And as soon as he said those words, Nathaniel's body started to shut down, and he could feel it.
Oh no.
So I can't imagine being my dad in this moment, holding your little baby boy, feeling his body shut down, going, I have no way to get my family. My son is dying, and I'm holding him, and my family's not here. I can't imagine. My two thoughts on it's he either must have been in an extreme panic, or just, this is my last time with my little boy. Mm-hmm. That must have been a super, super hard but super special moment for him.
Yeah.
But I can also imagine after a while he was probably going, you got to get up here, you got to get up. I can't imagine the panic in his head. You got to get up here. He's going home today. So finally we get up to the room, and I'm there for about 10 minutes, and he passed away. And my parents had kind of came to the conclusion that they were we do not want Japheth to be there when Nathaniel dies. They however, forgot to relay that information to Nathaniel. So the week that I was gone, I'm pretty confident he could have died that week. But he was waiting and holding on to see me one more time.
Wow.
So if your brother's coming, instantly starts shutting down.
Right.
I get up to the room, 10 minutes later, the Lord took him home.
Wow.
Like, he waited for me to be there. He needed me to hear my voice one more time before he left. And that's a super special moment for me. I was 5 at the time, so that was like...
Yeah, man.
I don't wish that on anybody.
No.
But there is a little bit of humor in the fact that my experience with death was like on cartoons and, people disappear.
Right.
So he died and I was like, but he didn't disappear yet. He's still here. Because I thought he would disappear, but no, not how that happens. And that was like mid-morning, I think, when he passed away.
Wow.
And then my uncle came and picked me up so my parents could take care of whatever needed to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Wasn't involved in that process. I don't know what you need to take care of when your child dies. But my uncle took me to West Ed, the mall, and we went to the Sea Lion show. And my whole memory of that day was it was gray.
Right.
There was no color. There was no joy. There was no life in that day. It was just gray. It was just gray.
Right.
And I remember feeling like I should be like, this is entertaining. I should be enjoying this, but I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine being that young and experiencing like death. Like, you already don't really understand the concept of it, really.
Yeah.
And then experiencing that with someone so close to you. I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, and I would say to this day I've never been closer with anybody than I was with Nathaniel.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remember, I said his name means gift from God, and that's truly what it was.
Right.
So because of what I went through with my brother, that has really shaped who I am now.
Yeah.
And he really truly was, like, he was a gift.
Yeah.
And for the longest time I wrestled with the idea. I was like, I wish I could see him again. And I still do. I would love to see him again. But I was like, if I could go back and if I had the power to change the past, I would bring him back.
Yeah.
And I'm at the point now where I would say I wouldn't.
Okay.
Like, who am I to, challenge the plans God has and his purpose for my life? So yeah, it sucks, but I wouldn't change it. And I know I'll get to see him again one day.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But
you can just look forward to that day. Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
Yeah, and then this 5-year-old, it was not easy to not easy to cope with. I don't even remember like the next 3 or 4 months after he died.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him dying the day he died, and then I remember we moved at some point and went from Nakeridge to living in Lacombe, and my next memories after he died were being in Lacombe, and I know there was a couple months between that.
All right.
So I don't remember anything after.
Dang. So, through that, I know you were really young, but what was your relationship with God, or what did you know about him during that time?
I had that like childlike faith,
Right.
Like God is good and all those childhood stories. I grew up, like my parents were both Christians, so I grew up going to church, and I think I'm pretty confident I still was going to church throughout that time too with my uncle and aunt.
Yeah.
And I don't remember doing any of this, but my mom says that throughout the whole time Nathaniel was sick, I kept saying to her, "It's okay, Mom. God's got it. Like
Wow.
God will take care of us, Mom. It's okay. No matter what happens, God's got us."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember ever doing that, but Mom said that was so impactful for her. Going, my 5-year-old son's like, God's got it, Mom.
Yeah.
She missed that
Childlike
reminder.
faith, man.
Yeah.
It's like, it's actually so powerful, and that's what the Bible teaches us, to go back to that.
Yeah.
In our life as an adult, bring back that childhood faith, because it's so powerful. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I think at that time I was fairly close with the Lord. Like, definitely some questions, but also I was 5 and 6. I don't remember.
Exactly.
Or 4 and 5, I guess. But so I don't remember much of my relationship with the Lord, but I know for a fact that I was like, "It's okay, Mom. God's got it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, God's good. He'll take care of us."
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that childhood faith is you understand authority and people that know more than you.
Yeah.
So when your dad or someone, a pastor, tells you, "Oh, God's got everything in his hands, everything's in control," you believe that with your full heart, because you listen to those people that know these things. And then, so, yeah, when tragedy comes, kids kind of, they just know, "Oh, yeah, God's got it." When adults, that's when the doubt comes in, right?
Yeah.
all those other things, other voices telling you different things, then. But
Yeah. And another, like the doctors who've been through this before, because that's not the first time, unfortunately, that they watched parents lose their children. A lot of them came to my brother's funeral and were surprised by the fact that my parents were still together.
oh wow.
And actually when I was at Cape and Ray 2 years ago, well, a year and a half, 2 years, somebody else had shared a story of how he had watched two people lose a child and they split. And that's a super common thing to happen because when you lose a child, if you don't have that faith, that foundation in God, you tend to there's blame and there's guilt, and part of the grieving process, you throw blame out and denial, right? Like it's not my fault. Like, and you can't accept the fact that they just died. It had to be somebody's fault.
Right.
And usually the blame then gets thrown on the spouse and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So when the doctors saw my parents still together, they're like, how are you still together? That's awesome.
Yeah.
And my parents' response would have been, we are in covenant relationship with each other and with God, and without that, like, we have nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So their faith was strong enough at that point, and there was a lot of wrestling and questioning that they did afterwards through that too. But that whole event, I think, kind of shaped all of us, shaped our faith going forward, and it's kind of been like the anchor that held me there. Whenever I was struggling, I would always turn back to my brother and go, you know what, God had me that time, He's got me now.
Right.
So it's been a very critical part of my journey.
Yeah, for sure.
And it happened so young.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's like almost all your life you've been dealing with that, really.
Yeah, and I don't actually think people understand what a broken heart is until you've been through something like that.
Totally.
There's definitely, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that have been through some stuff, but I just always thought when people were like, oh yeah, I have, like, my heart got broken, blah, 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 I was like, you don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
My heart has been broken to the point where I was physically in pain.
Yeah.
Like the emotional, and I don't know how else to describe it other than there literally felt like my soul was breaking apart.
Yeah.
And there's still nights sometimes when I'll lie in bed and I feel that way still. But I honestly, at this point, I'm terrified of the day that it stops hurting, because that means I stopped caring.
Right.
And it stopped being an impact in my life. So, and everybody tells you that the pain goes away. Like, you heal with time. I honestly think it's more you just learn how to live with it through time.
Exactly.
And it's not like I'm constantly like, oh, I'm in so much emotional pain. I'm not. My life's good. My life, like, I have life in abundance with the Lord. But there's definitely that heaviness that kind of just sticks with you. And you learn how to just carry it around and not let it control you. But.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's probably not something that's easy to share.
It's gotten easier over the years.
Yeah, for sure. So, has that ever been like a hindrance on your faith, been going through that, or has that kind of helped you turn to God, that experience?
I would say it's never really been a hindrance.
Okay.
But I bet you, probably because I was so young that it wasn't a hindrance. I still had that childlike faith.
Yeah.
For my parents, it definitely was. They went through a time of wrestling, like, Lord, why did you take my son?
Yeah, for sure.
That's not fair. And it's not.
No.
Especially when I have a cousin who was born on the same day as Nathaniel.
Okay.
And she's still here.
Yeah.
So my parents wrestled with that. They're like same day, and she's still here. And our son's gone. But they're at the point too now where it's no longer a hindrance, and it's honestly a blessing, which sounds weird.
Right.
That the loss of somebody so special could be a blessing, but it really is, and it's helped us all throughout our lives. Like, I've been able to touch the lives of other people because it's like I've been there. I have that, like, I understand what you're going through because I've been through it.
Yeah.
And my parents have too, and then a little later on in life, some other family members of ours went through a super hard time, and they ended up moving in with us for a month. And because we had been through tragedy as a family, we knew how, like, we were able to come alongside them and support them through it. And then again, a few years later, another family member, my grandpa, developed dementia. And so for the last 5 years of his life was battling dementia and basically wasn't my grandpa anymore. He was just a
Right.
shell of this former being.
Mm-hmm.
But because we'd been through tragedy as a family before, we were able to come alongside my grandma
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of the family and just walk through it. There was definitely some hard times through that, but God equipped us
Yeah.
through my brother for so many things. And even the trajectory of my life, I think, would be so drastically different if Nathaniel never died.
Right. That's so true. And yeah, because you're studying right now to be a pastor, right? That's
Yeah.
what you want? Like speaking, that type of pastor?
Yeah, I'd love to be a teaching pastor someday, I think.
Cool.
And I don't know that I'd be doing that if it wasn't for Nathaniel,
Right.
in all honesty.
Yeah. Was there a time that was like, oh, I want to be a pastor? Or was it kind of this gradual?
It was a very gradual thing. So like I mentioned earlier, I had a rough time in high school with my faith. I think that's pretty typical.
Right.
In high school, you start to like wrestle with who you are, like, and things going on in the world. So I kind of dipped off, and then I had a moment where I kind of came back to the Lord. I actually was watching. Have you ever seen the movie I Still Believe about Jeremy Camp?
Yeah, I did watch that one.
I've only ever watched that movie once. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again because that was super hard for me to watch.
Yeah.
But it just broke me through all my struggles, and I just realized how much I needed the Lord again.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started coming back, and then my faith still kind of went through those like ups and downs throughout high school. And then COVID hit, and that hurt my faith a bit too. And I had intended to go play basketball in college, was my goal. But because of COVID, that never happened. So I ended up just working for a year, took a year off. And then during high school, I kind of had the thought of it'd be cool to be a pastor one day and be up on a stage and preaching. But never taking it really seriously.
Did you go to a Christian high school? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I went to Cash in Lacombe, Central Alberta Christian High School.
Okay.
But yeah, it took quite a while for me to get to the point where I was like, I'm going to be a pastor. I actually ended up through the job I was working at, I ended up witnessing to two of my coworkers and just realized I was like, dang, I've been doing this faith thing my whole life.
Yeah.
Not very well, but like, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need to fix that. And I ended up going to Cape and Ray in BC, Cape and Ray Harbor on Thetis Island. And then through my time there, I was like, I just grew so close with the Lord. Learned so much. I got 40 years worth of church in 6 months is how they describe it.
Oh, yeah?
So
Nice.
I'm 21 years old with 60 years of church experience. So.
Nice.
But I was reading the Bible at the time, my girlfriend. We were not together anymore, but we were reading the Bible, and I casually mentioned to her. I was like, oh, I thought about being a pastor in the past. And I think we were reading from James 4:15, and it basically, I can't remember exactly what verse it was. I think it was 4:15. I'm going to look it up quick because I don't want to get that wrong.
Yeah, fair enough.
But basically, the verse said, if the Lord has it in plan for you, he will make it happen in your life.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and was like, oh, it's going to happen. The Lord has it for you to be a pastor. You're going to be a pastor. And I was like, haha, very funny. Whatever. Right, moved on.
Yeah.
Let's see. James 4:15. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that.
Yeah.
So basically, she took that as, if the Lord wills it, you will do what he has for you, and you're going to be a pastor.
Yeah.
And just kind of a joke, and I was like, haha, whatever. The next day at breakfast, so the way they do breakfast there is or meals is you sit all together with everybody from Cape and Ray.
Right.
And I was sitting with a bunch of people from my home group, which was also like I typically sat with my friends. But that day I ended up sitting with people from my home group. So there was 100 and some people there. So we'd do like Bible studies together where the second year students would lead it. So they would break us up into what they called home groups, and you'd meet in one of the staff members' homes and you do like a Bible study. So I was sitting with a bunch of them. I don't remember how it got brought up, but one of them looked at me and was like, you'd be a good pastor. And then everybody around the table chimes in, yeah, you should like that. You would be a good pastor. You should look into that. And I was like, okay, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in God.
Right.
And there's no way this gets brought up the day after I joked about being a pastor.
Yeah.
So then I started to think about it, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to read the word.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my buddies had said, when you're trying to determine if it's something the Lord's trying to get you to do, there's 4 things you need. You need confirmation in self, so something that you think you can do.
Right.
confirmation in others, something that others are going, yes, you should do that.
Okay.
And those two are probably your least important. I would say the confirmation in others is definitely helpful, but also can be a little misleading sometimes.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with that one. But the big one is confirmation through prayer and confirmation through the word. So I had confirmation in self because I knew it was something that I thought of and I did think it would be cool, but I was like, no. I had confirmation in others from the people around me. And then I actually ended up calling my parents and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm thinking maybe I should look into ministry. And they both just went, yes! We've wanted that for you for so long, but we never said anything because we wanted you to get there on your own. I was like, oh, well, crap, now I really have to think about this.
Yeah.
So confirmation in others, it should come from the people that know you the best.
Yeah, for sure.
My parents. And they were both like, yes, like you need to like do that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, now I actually have to think about it. So I prayed about it. And my devotions for the whole week were have obedience to the Lord. And I was like, okay, fine, I will look into it.
Yeah.
So then I ended up talking to my mentor there, and a couple mentors actually. And then I ended up reaching out to Pastor Jordan Kavanaugh here at Crossroads. And I said, hey, I'm at Cape and Ray right now. I'm feeling like the Lord's calling me to ministry. Do you have time to meet when I get back? And he was like, absolutely, I'd love to meet with you and get you on that path. So I ended up meeting with him when I got back from Cape and Ray, and he hooked me up with Rocky Mountain College, and off I went.
Sweet.
I've been doing that for a year and a half now, I think.
So you met with him last summer? Or?
Yeah, technically 2 summers ago now.
Oh, okay.
So last summer of 2023.
Oh, okay.
Would have been May.
Right.
No, April. It was April 2023. And then I started school that fall.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I met with Jordan like around June 2023, and that's how I worked here as well. And it was random too, because I was just in church, and then he saw me in one of the pews. I think I was alone, or I might have been with a buddy. And then he came up to me. He's like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. What have you been up to? And I was like, oh, I just finished school doing like video stuff. And he's like, oh, we might have a opening for a job for you. I was like, really? That would be awesome. And then, yeah, a month later, I'm working here.
That's awesome.
At the church, so it's kind of crazy. We kind of both found this place that way. And now here we are starting a podcast.
Yeah, a year later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one of my mentors at Cape and Ray. So he's the director of Cape and Ray.
Yeah.
And I think he met with most of the first year students. And it's you're always like, oh crap, the director wants to talk with me.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? But usually it was him trying to pitch the second year program to us. And we ended up having a really sweet chat, walked for a bit. And he was like, so what are you thinking of doing after Cape and Ray? And I was like, well, lately I've been wrestling with the idea of pursuing ministry. But I'm not so sure. And he was like, it sounds to me like you're standing on the edge of the cliff and God's asking you to jump.
Right.
And I was like, oh, dang. That's so true. Because that's what it felt like when I thought about it. I was like, totally am. I'm standing on this cliff of security of what I like, what I want.
Yeah.
And there's this big abyss in front of me, and he's asking me to step into the abyss and trust that he's going to catch me. I was like, dang. So I thought about it for the week. And then that week, actually, I went testosterone-fueled man, stupidity. I tried to climb a cliff. My girlfriend may or may not have been watching. Yeah. And it may or may not have been a double date with another guy. And he climbed the cliff. I suggested it. I was like, let's climb this cliff. And he's like, all right, let's do it. He went in front. He climbs the cliff. I get three-quarters of the way up. I'm 10, 15 feet in the air. Mm-hmm. And I'm wearing my Blundstones, which have like horrible traction.
Yeah.
Especially for slick rock.
You took your Blundstones up a cliff? That's crazy.
Yeah. And I fell off, and I put a hole in my knee. And I laughed, and then I called my mom, and she was like, and I told her about my conversation I'd had with the director. And she was like, what, you actually have to fall off a cliff before you're willing to let God proverbially catch you off the cliff you're facing? And I was like,
it's definitely a mom thing to say.
Yeah, but it was so true. I had to fall off that cliff and realize that if I can fall off that cliff, I can trust God with my life.
Yeah, there you go.
So I took the step, and that's when I emailed Jordan. And then, yeah.
That's cool. I honestly, one of my favorite parts about the Bible and God is how much He uses metaphor. I love metaphor, and I know you do too.
Yeah.
You write poetry and stuff.
Yeah.
Metaphor is absolutely my favorite. We were having a Bible study yesterday at the church. Oh yeah, a couple days ago, and we were talking about how God uses landscapes in the Bible to describe everyone's hearts. And then we just went on this tangent of
Metaphor after metaphor.
About what different landscapes we feel in, and I was all for it. I love it. Because it's such a good way to explain something you can't otherwise explain.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I feel in my relationship with God? Oh, it feels like I'm in a log cabin, and I have to keep the fire going. And if I don't keep the fire going, I just get cold. This was one of the metaphors they used yesterday. And then sometimes, like, keeping a fire is work. So sometimes you'd rather just put on a blanket than keep stoking the fire. And then eventually you're covered in blankets and there's no more fire. And then you have to open yourself up and realize your life is pretty cold without those blankets and no fire. And I think I love all those metaphors, and obviously in that one, the fire is the Holy Spirit in you and keeping you warm, keeping you afloat. Yeah, it's just my favorite. I could go on and on about metaphors.
Yep. I also loved in that one how we were kind of talking about the idea of once that fire goes out, once you have the Lord and you turn away, it's so much harder to find Him again.
Yeah.
And once you let that fire die, it's a lot of work to restart it.
Right.
And you have to take the blankets, and taking the blankets off doesn't start the fire.
Exactly.
You actually have to go do the work.
Right. Exactly. Because we use the blankets in that metaphor as like sin. You find comfort in the blankets, but they're temporary, and you have to keep adding more to get that comfort because it just keeps getting colder without the fire.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh. I apparently actually wrote a poem about when I was stepping off the cliff. So do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, I love that.
So it's literally called The Cliff.
Oh, The Cliff. There you go.
The Cliff.
Is this before or after you fell off the actual cliff?
Let me check. March 15 is when I wrote it. Nope, that's Slack, not pictures. Where's pictures? There's pictures. Because I have pictures of my knee.
Was it bad?
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly.
Dang.
Are you squeamish?
Mm-mm.
There you go.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Oh, that is.
I put a good hole in my knee. That was 2 days. I wrote the poem, and then 2 days later, I fell off the cliff.
Oh my goodness! Sorry for the people listening. You
can't see. I don't.
You
think
don't want to see it anyway.
Yeah, that was that night.
DM us on Instagram. We'll send you the picture if you want.
Yeah, if you really want to see the picture, you can ask, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah, and that's at Yap Life Podcast on Instagram.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't seen it.
Slick little. Put that in there real quick. So yeah, I wrote the cliff, and then 2 days later, I fell off the cliff.
Right.
And then the next week, I stepped off the cliff.
There you go.
I'm standing at the edge of an abyss. The journey here was long, making my body tired and my mind weary. Yet you led me here faithfully, drawing me to this cliff. Why have you led me here? Was this journey fruitless, or are you asking me to leap out in faith? This thought, it scares me, but staying here even more so. How long for a third option, for another way out? How I long for a third option, another way out. But that would be cheating, and I don't intend on cheating. So here I stand, at the edge of myself, at the edge of this abyss. It is high and the ground hidden. I cannot see across it. The way is clouded, but to turn back is folly, so here I stand. My journey here tells me you won't let me fall, tells me you'll see me through, yet still I'm scared, dreading this next step, stuck on the edge. If only I could see the other side, but you've hidden it from me, daring me to blindly trust, to have faith, to move despite myself. So I draw in a breath, hold it, and exhale, quieting my thundering heart, cleaning my rampant mind, preparing to take a step, hoping against hope that you'll catch me, praying that I'm not being the fool, and falling to my doom. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I step out, out over the cliff where there is no bridge. Time stops as you hold me fast. You've kept me from falling. Now all I have to do is keep going and trust the cliff behind me, my life in front of me.
Wow, that's good stuff. Yeah, you've always been good at poetry, eh?
Yeah, it was really weird actually. That first time I wrote a poem.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote my first poem when I was 12.
Okay. Pretty early.
Yeah, and it was about Nathaniel actually, and it's called 7 Years because it was 7 years after he died.
Yeah.
And I remember writing it. I think it was in February. I don't know why I remember that. And I was supposed to be sleeping, but I just I had this thought, and I wrote it.
Yeah.
On my iPod, I think at the time, and I ran out of my room to my parents who were watching TV, and I was like, "Mom, Dad, I wrote a poem," and they were like, "You're supposed to be sleeping."
Yeah.
But they ended up reading it. I went to bed, and then the next day, Mom was like, "I'm putting that in your scrapbook because that was really good."
Mm.
So I wrote it then, and then I didn't write another poem again for another 4 years. I think it was
Wow.
grade 10. I was 16, and I just started writing. I had written 3 little quick ones, and then one day I was in the shower, and I just had this image of a rose up on a planet in space all by itself.
Cool.
And I was like, I gotta write about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. That was that's what I consider my first big step into poetry. And I wrote it in that style. I'd have my own personal style basically. So I'd do 5-line stanzas.
Yeah.
And then, just repeat that. And I called it The Flower, and I shared it with my youth leader at the time. And she was like, "Can you send me that?" So I sent it to her, shared it with my mom, and she was reading from Luke somewhere at the time, and it fit in really well with what she was reading.
Wow.
And then the next week, my youth leader came to me, and she's like, "Thank you so much. That actually helped me get through some stuff."
Wow.
And I was like, dang, I can help people with my poetry.
Yeah.
So ever since then, I've kind of been writing on and off, and there's been a few where I've written them and gone, that was real, and then look back and go, that was really bad. That was really dark.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of that one because that's that. But I've been writing poems for now 5 years.
That's sweet.
I have over probably 100 poems that I've written.
Nice. And what do you use them for? Is it just kind of for your own mental?
Yeah, I think it's my way of processing life.
Yeah.
Lots of times I write when I'm struggling with something or trying to work through something. And usually I just get this image or this one idea in my head, and I just write about it, and it takes me 10 minutes to write a poem.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, "How do you do that?" I don't know. I just do. It just
comes. Yeah.
Like the image of a flower in space.
Yeah.
Just randomly came into my head, and I wrote about it.
That's cool.
And even the background on my phone it's a rose on fire. I really like flowers for some reason when I write. I think they're a beautiful metaphor and imagery.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'll read that first poem if you don't mind.
Yeah. This is the rose one. What was it called?
The Flower.
The Flower.
This is the first one not the first one I ever wrote, but the first one that was my big forte.
Right.
Step into my documents on my phone for my personal Gmail account. It's just all poetry.
Oh yeah.
It's 90% poetry. Where is it? Because I think I'll just search it up. Flower.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing, but with music. Music is what gets me, and I love the metaphor in music.
I've thought about trying to transfer some of my poetry into music, but I'm not musical enough.
Right.
I love music,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. Man, you are all being blessed today with 2 of my poems.
Wow.
I mean, I think both of them I had on Instagram for a while.
Cool.
But, yeah, so this is The Flower. Darkness. Nothing but cold and darkness. Cold, darkness, and fear. Not a bloom of hope, nor a petal of joy. Only fear and despair. Darkness. That was all. Fear, darkness, and cold. Then one day, a light. A light that at first was faint. But time went on, and the light grew stronger. And as the light grew, darkness fell. And there was light and hope. I bloomed with joy and glee, for the darkness, it had gone. Sometimes it returns, but so too does the light. So goes life. Sometimes there is darkness and fear, and then the light comes, and there is hope and joy. You bloom when there is light, and shrivel when there is darkness. But such is the way of life, never constant, but always changing from light to dark. We are defined not as our fears, but as what we do in the light, by what we do to survive the dark. Just like a flower, we survive until the light. We bloom in glory, then shrivel in fear, waiting for the light, fighting till the end, living the cold, the dark, and the fear. These are my words to you, the flower in your head.
Wow. Dang.
That
is so good.
See, and I like read it and I'm like, oh, this sounds so cheesy, but people seem to really like it, so.
Well, like, poetry is cheesy.
It is.
I think, like, it's same with, like, when I'm listening to a song and I'm like, oh, I really like that lyric, and I write out the lyric, and the lyric by itself just sounds so cheesy, and it just sounds like, oh, come on. But, like, when it's sang in the music and all that, I'm like, yeah, I'm still gonna stand by this lyric no matter how cheesy it sounds.
Yeah.
But
I think metaphors can just kind of be cheesy.
Mm-hmm. Well, anything that's like deep and vulnerable can be taken as cheesy, as kind of a scapegoat to feel something or to not feel something, you know? Just like, oh, that's just cheesy.
Yeah.
Or you can just open yourself up to what it's trying to say.
Yeah.
You know?
See, and that's what I love about poetry. It's just so... It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just the world in my head being put on paper.
So true.
Or on a document, I guess. Google document. But, and I love the metaphors, and all my poems are metaphors for life, basically.
Right. Yeah. And I think what's been revealed to me in the past couple of years is how you find meaning through things over time. Like, if you see something and you're like, oh, what is that? Blah, blah, blah. Even, like, this tattoo. I don't know if you guys can see it. When I first got it, it was kind of like when my brother was going through a breakup and he wanted to get tattoos together. And I was like, yeah, I'll just do that because I wanted to help him out in some way. Just be there for him. So I found this and I was like, oh, this is cool. I had this picture on my phone for a while. And then since I've got it, I've found so much meaning in it because I'm going back to my interest things that we were talking about at our Bible study. I believe that God instills interest in us from the time we were born, when he's knitting us together in the womb. Like, I'll say what I said on Wednesday. Like, when you're 4 or 5 years old and you see an airplane in the sky and you're like, whoa, that's so cool, and you're just like, you love it and you're so like astonished by what you're seeing. Oh, it's flying in the sky. And then another kid's like, whatever, it's just a plane.
Yeah.
It's like that interest in the planes is innate. You didn't choose to have that interest. You're like, I'm gonna like airplanes. No, you just like airplanes.
What are you talking about? My parents put a list in front of me and I was like, I like this, this, and this.
Yeah, exactly.
I picked what I liked, and then I realized I was wrong later on. But
Exactly. But that's the thing. That's why I wasn't too scared, because I knew I liked this image. I maybe didn't know why.
Yeah.
And then since having it on my body, I've derived so much meaning. Like, why do I like this? And I found out, like, it brings out the childlike in me. Like, it's this wacky, like, it's a, I don't know if you can zoom in, it's it's a kraken shaped like a UFO abducting a cow.
Oh, that's what that is.
That's what it is. It's a cow being abducted by an octopus kraken UFO. And at first glance, it's like, what? And I've pulled a lot out of it. Like, I love marine life. Like, I think octopi and kraken is my favorite mythical creature. So that I already knew. But the fact that it's silly and it just doesn't make a lot of sense, I think that it allows me to keep that type of person that I am, that enjoys those silly things, with me for the rest of my life. Yeah. I don't want to ever lose that part of me that's silly, doesn't take things too seriously, just keep that joy in my life. So, yeah, I think we can pull meaning out of anything we find interest in or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Not even just things that are interesting, but just out of your life.
Yeah.
Like, if looking back, I find so much meaning through the death of my brother.
Yeah.
I find so much meaning through the poems that I write, and so much.
And often it takes so much time.
Yeah.
And which is okay, because there's stuff you got to process and all that.
It's a life, and you got to live it.
It's life. You gotta live it. Sometimes you just gotta yap about that too.
Exactly.
We've come full circle. I think that's about time for us.
Yeah, I was feeling the same way. We've been going for quite a while, but
Yeah, I think that's been around 45 minutes. Anyway, we'll try to keep it around that time. We'll see. 45 was kind of our...
yeah, 40
base.
to like 40 minutes to about an hour is probably what we're going to aim for most of these episodes.
We want it to be digestible without being
Yeah.
too much.
I feel like those, if you're like me, after the 45th minute, you're kind of like, okay, shut up, I'm done. This is still going.
They're still yapping.
It's time to listen to some music,
Exactly.
Ryan's voice is getting pretty annoying. Just kidding. It's probably my voice is getting annoying.
It's just.
And if you're watching, you're probably going, man, these guys are starting to look pretty ugly. I need to have a change of scenery.
Too much light. We can see everything.
Actually, you know what? They're probably going, dang, if I stare at these guys any longer, I'm going to like fall in love and not be able to
Exactly.
do anything.
We're both single now, but the next one we won't be
we're changing
single.
that. That's the whole goal of the podcast.
By the next episode, we'll both have someone.
You totally just unashamedly brought up the fact we're both single. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It's great. They need to know. That was an awful way. Anyway, we should end this before it gets worse than it already is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. So next week it'll be a couple weeks till the next one comes out, but we'll get Ryan to share his testimony so you hear more from him, his story.
We'll be posting every 2 weeks on Friday at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Yes,
We
not
live-
Eastern Standard.
Not Eastern. We live in the
live
West.
in the West,
In Canada. I'm not going to give you the coordinates because there's some weirdos out there.
I mean, I've already said Lacombe right here.
Yeah, they can probably figure it out. Anyway.
Maybe I just said those. Actually, I just said those. Not maybe. I just said those to give you a false
To throw
impression.
you off, yeah.
In reality, we live...
Where's Lacombe? I've never heard of that in my life.
It's in Japan.
Yeah, that's the one.
I say that because it has a sister city in Japan.
Lacombe?
Yeah.
Oh.
Fun fact for all of you.
What?
Lacombe has a sister city in Japan called like Ryoku or something like that.
Our Lacombe.
Yeah.
That's so weird. How do you just have a sister
Our
city?
Lacombe. I own Lacombe.
Yeah.
This is communism. Our... No.
But like you can have... Anyway, we gotta end this.
Yeah,
That's
it's got
cool.
a sister city. But anyways, yeah. You can expect a new podcast every 2 weeks. Fridays. This one's coming out October 11.
Yep.
So the next one will be October 25.
That's some good math right there.
Quick maths.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah.
Yep Life Podcast.
So long, baby!